It's time for another look into the history of Spyro the Dragon, and today's video will of course be about the final game to appear on the PlayStation 1 and my personal favourite of the whole series, Year of the Dragon. I've really been looking forward to this one. It has some of the most memorable realms in the trilogy, and playing a different character besides Spyro is a breath of fresh air. Not to mention Insomniac Games really went all out on the variety of mini-games and side missions available. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of Spyro 3, there's two tiny issues I want to address about my previous Spyro 2 video, as a few people made comments about them. The first is how I described the realm Zephyr as the one nobody likes. Well, turns out a lot of people actually did enjoy Zephyr, so I apologise for my ignorant statement. The second is that I forgot to talk about the bonus realm Dragon Shores. I try not to go into detail about bonus realms, in case I spoil the surprise for newcomers to the series, but this time round it completely slipped my mind to even mention it, so apologies again. Anyway, now that's out of the way, let's stomp, saw, smash and shoot our way through Spyro, Year of the Dragon. Development. Development on Year of the Dragon, named due to the year 2000 being the Year of the Dragon in the Chinese zodiac, began shortly after the release of Spyro 2, and when I say shortly after, I mean the same month and year. Sony really didn't want to give Insomniac Games a break, did they? Development went on for nearly 11 months before the game was finished in September 2000 and released late October of the same year. Despite having less than a year to make another Spyro game, Ted Price, the CEO of Insomniac Games, stated it was one of the most smoothest development cycles the team ever had since starting the series. The two previous titles had helped the team come up with a process that really worked for them, which in turn meant Spyro 3 could be developed in less time while still maintaining the same level of quality as its predecessors, if not better. While coming up with new ideas for their third instalment in the Spyro franchise, the team took a lot of inspiration from other games. You'll see elements of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Goldeneye, Crash Bandicoot, as well as the odd film reference here and there. Perhaps the biggest change from previous entries though is the addition of the extra playable characters Sheila, Sergeant Byrd, Bentley, Agent 9, and even Sparx himself. Ted Price states, "Instead of burdening Spyro with a bunch of extra moves, we wanted players to experience new control schemes and introduce new faces. The best way to do this was through the critters. Since all four are so different, we believe that we created a much greater variety of gameplay by using them versus sticking with Spyro." Another change in this title was the implementation of crack protection. Spyro 1 and 2 both had copy protection, but it wasn't enough to stop the most determined hackers from cracking the games. Spyro 2 was cracked just over a week after it released, to give you an idea of how fast these guys work. The problem is that a lot of game sales occur in the first few months, around 30 to 50% of total sales in fact, depending on the game and time of year it's released. So a good chunk of sales would often be lost from cracked versions. The crack protection on Spyro 3 was the solution, and it was so good that it took hackers over 2 months to develop a working patch, plenty of time for sales to rack up. Instead of just checking that the game was running from an original disc, Spyro 3's crack protection checked for any alterations in the game. Anything slightly out of place, and the game would completely mess up for you. We're talking missing gems and eggs, portals that take you to the wrong realm, and my personal favourite, the final boss sending you back to the beginning of the game. Oh, and if you thought you had got away with it, and had no glitches, sometimes the delightful fairy Zoe would appear and politely inform you about your hacked game, just to let you know what a terrible person you are. This of course was the last Spyro game to be developed by Insomniac Games. As much as the team loved working on the series, they felt they couldn't bring anything new to the table, and decided it was better to leave it on a high note, after 5 stressful but awesome years. Insomniac Games went on to develop the Ratchet & Clank series, Resistance series, and are set to release the upcoming 2018 Spider-Man game, their first ever licensed game. Story, world and characters. The story of Spyro 3 starts off with a cutscene in the world of dragons, as it always does. Spyro, Hunter the cheetah, and the rest of the dragons are fast asleep surrounded by dragon eggs. A mysterious hooded creature suddenly appears out of a hole in the ground, followed by a group of Rhinox. Humanoid rhino creatures that come in various colours and sizes, and make up the majority of enemies you'll face in the game. The hooded figure, who we later find out is called Bianca, instructs the Rhinox to take the dragon eggs back with them through the holes they appeared out of. As she makes her way to one of the holes with the last dragon egg, she accidentally steps on Hunter's tail, causing him to scream in pain and wake up all the dragons, including Spyro. A very short chase ensues, but Bianca escapes with the egg. Another cutscene plays, showing Bianca talking with her ruler and mentor, the sorceress. While the sorceress damns her protégé with faint praise, Zoe the fairy overhears their conversation and quickly races back to the dragons to let them know the location of the eggs. The Forgotten Worlds. Spyro and Hunter go through the holes in order to recover the stolen eggs, which have now been scattered about in every homeworld and realm, for some reason. Seriously, why didn't the sorceress just lock them up in a vault or something? Especially considering her ulterior motive for the baby dragons, which I'll talk about later. Now, this next part is going to be a hodgepodge of information, as I need to discuss the characters Spyro meets while still talking about the story, but in order to do that I really need to talk about the homeworlds, and if I'm going to talk about the homeworlds I need to mention the realms. Basically, this is going to be a long section with a complete mix of information, so bear with me. Let's start off by discussing homeworlds and their contents. There are 4 homeworlds in Spyro 3, and, like the previous games, they follow a certain theme, time of day in this instance. The first is Sunrise Spring. This homeworld is set at perpetual dawn and is made up of vibrant green fields, wooded areas, and a large clear lake. The homeworld is staggered into various levels, and there's even a luminescent cave that Spyro can fly through. Bianca turns up twice in this homeworld, to threaten Spyro at the beginning of the game, and later to confront him and Hunter together, to little effect. The first new playable character you'll come across is Sheila the Kangaroo. Like the 3 other new characters, she's been captured by the sorceress at some point before or during the events of the game, and is guarded closely by the pompous, money-hungry git known as Moneybags. Yep, he's back to take your gems once again. For a small fee, he'll release his captive, and they'll be playable in their respective realms and in certain minigames. But not before they teach that dastardly Moneybags a lesson. If the name and species weren't stereotypical enough, Sheila also speaks with an Australian accent. She's an easygoing character, and very knowledgeable on the history of the Forgotten Worlds, being the first to inform Spyro that it was once the original home of the dragons, and that when the dragons left, the magic went with them. Now let's move on and talk about the realms. They function more or less the same as they did in the previous 2 games, but this time on a much larger scale and complete with separate areas for minigames. Seriously, some of these realms are huge, with a couple taking me well over 30 minutes to 100% complete. A big change from the good old days where I could be done and dusted with a realm in less than 10 minutes. Each homeworld contains a set of normal realms, an alternative playable characters realm, a Speedway, and a special Sparx realm. Some of the realms are locked like in Spyro 2, but not because there's a greedy bear standing by waiting to take your gems. This time around, it's because the fading magic is causing some of the portals to fail. In order to fix them, Spyro must collect a certain amount of eggs and get the magic flowing through the world again. Sparx realms are also locked, but not because of fading magic. They will only become accessible once you beat the upcoming boss and move on to the next homeworld. Then you just need to travel back to the previous one to play it. 2 things I'd like to mention about Spyro 3 realms. One good and one... bad isn't the right word, more disappointing. The good thing is the lovely designs the artist made for the portals. Usually the entrance to a realm is designed to reflect the homeworld it's situated in, but these ones have been made to match their realm. It's a nice little touch that makes me love this game even more. Now, the disappointing thing is that there are no cutscenes when entering and leaving a realm like there was in Spyro 2, which is a shame, as the cutscenes were great. They set the mood for the realm you were visiting or had visited, and added a splash of humour to an already colourful and fun game. But never mind, eh? The realm's content more than makes up for this. So, there are 7 realms in total in Sunrise Spring. The first realm visited is usually Sunny Villa, due to it being the first you see when you start playing. Sunny Villa is a Roman-inspired realm, with the inhabitants and Rhinox dressed accordingly. It serves as a tutorial realm like Glimmer in Spyro 2, so expect some enemies that don't fight back and lots of hints from Zoe. The goal is to defeat the Rhinox terrorising the citizens and eating all their giant chickens. The next realm is Cloud Spires. The inhabitants of Cloud Spires are called Weather Imps, cute little fairy creatures with tiny wings and spiky hair that resembles the cloud generator found in their realm. Spyro must help the Weather Imps activate the bellows situated around Cloud Spires, which in turn will activate their cloud generator. The Rhinoc enemies here resemble Vikings and Valkyrie, and, depending on the Rhinoc, will use either a lightning attack to zap Spyro, or flap their wings to push him away. Molten Crater is the first realm you come across that's locked until you've collected enough eggs. As the name suggests, this realm is basically one large crater filled with lava, with a few grassy ledges here and there so Spyro doesn't burn his bum. The inhabitants resemble idols and spend most days partying at the Tiki Lodge. Enemies include Rhinox with machetes and shields, larger Rhinox with whips, and warthogs that will charge at Spyro. Seashell Shore is Sunrise Springs' last normal realm. The action takes place both on land and in water, with Spyro starting out in an underwater cave. The seal inhabitants have got themselves into trouble by borrowing the Rhinox submarine and subsequently crashing it into a pile of rocks. The culprits were then thrown into a jail cell by the Rhinox, so it's up to Spyro to rescue them. On the way, he'll need to defeat a wide variety of enemies, including octopuses that spin attack, scuba diving Rhinox that fire projectiles, barrel throwing Rhinox sailors, Rhinox hiding in seashells, and finally a mini-boss called Bluto, who uses a shark submarine to attack Spyro. Luckily, Spyro has his own naval vessel to attack with. Sheila's Alp is home to the kangaroo herself, and is inhabited by lederhosen-wearing goats that speak with Swiss accents. Because why not? You'd expect Sheila to live somewhere that resembles the Australian outback, but nope, she seems more at home halfway up a mountain. Enemies here come in two varieties, Rhinox with ice picks, and angry moose that will try to charge at Sheila. Mushroom Speedway is how the world would be if you shrunk down to the size of a bug, filled with giant mushrooms and dandelions, and part of the course even takes you through overturned tree stumps. The inhabitants are of the insect variety, spiders and butterflies to be exact. The names of the Sparx realms give you a basic idea of what you'll be up against. For example, this one is called Crawdad Farm, so expect to be attacked by crawdads and crabs here. The boss is the Crawdad King. Watch out for his fire and rocket attacks. Once you finish all the normal realms in a homeworld, the vehicle to take you to the next hub will be ready. In Sunrise Spring, it's a balloon, just like the good old days of Spyro 1. Before you can access the next homeworld, you'll need to take on a big bad boss. While fighting each boss, the playable character from the homeworld you just left will help Spyro out. Sunrise Spring's boss is Buzz, who started out life as a Rhinox before being transformed into a monstrous toad creature by Bianca, at the sorceress's command of course. Sheila helps out in the fight and is ultimately the one to finish Buzz off, as all Spyro can do is charge Buzz into the green ooze surrounding the arena. Buzz has 3 phases. The first will have him try to avoid being charged by jumping left and right. The second phase has Buzz summoning a ring of fire for a few seconds after he jumps to protect himself from Spyro's charge attack. In the third phase, he'll not only jump and summon the fire circle, but spit fire at Spyro as well. He also has a spinning attack after he jumps out of the lava, but this can be outpaced by Spyro's charge speed. Overall, he's a relatively easy boss to defeat, which isn't surprising given he's the first one you come across if you don't count sub-bosses. Now we can move on to the second homeworld, Midday Gardens. As the name suggests, it's perpetual midday here, and the hub is made up of various gardens, fancy structures, and small bodies of water, the sort of thing you'd see in a stately home in the English countryside. It's quite an open hub, with plenty of space for Spyro to charge, but it's also surrounded by mountains on one side and a dense forest on the other. There's also an iced over pool in the cave in this homeworld, odd considering the rest of the environment. Bianca again shows up as you enter Midday Gardens, but spends less time threatening Spyro and more time trying to warn him about the dangers of the Forgotten Worlds. She's seen later trying to practice her magic, which almost ends in complete disaster, until Hunter saves her from the monster bunny she's created, and in turn she rescues him from it. While she initially shows gratitude, Spyro's mockery at her lack of magic has her scurrying away, much to Hunter's annoyance. Do I smell a romance brewing? The second playable character you'll rescue from the evil moneybags is everybody's favourite military penguin, Sergeant James Byrd. Taught to fly by hummingbirds, and carrying the latest in weapons technology, the bird-to-air missile launchers, Sergeant Byrd is not someone to be trifled with. He speaks with a British accent, and if the name wasn't obvious enough, he's a clear parody of 007 agent James Bond. Midday Gardens has 7 realms. One of the more memorable realms for me, and I'm sure other people, is Spooky Swamp, for a number of reasons. Firstly, the Firefly inhabitants speak in haiku, all the time. Secondly, even though the realm is surrounded by water, you can't splash around in it, because of course hungry piranhas. Thirdly, these guys. Remember my last video when I talked about that awful escort mission in Fracture Hills? Well, this escort mission makes that one look like a cakewalk, but I'll talk more about it in the gameplay section. Enemies here include Rhinox carrying lanterns, Rhinox with a slingshot, chompy alligators, stingy mosquitoes, and a sub-boss called Sleepyhead, who spawns alligators and throws bombs at Spyro. This realm is infamous for its lost gem glitch, a bug where, for some reason, one gem will completely disappear from the realm and you won't be able to find it, resulting in you never being able to 100% complete the game. Lovely. Enchanted Towers is one of those huge realms I talked about earlier, with this one taking me well over 30 minutes to fully complete. It's quite an odd looking realm, with most of the architecture appearing misshapen and bent. The goal for Spyro is to destroy the statue of the sorceress, something the inhabitants are grateful for after she forced them to build it and then complained about how ugly it is. The Rhinox in this realm are themed around construction workers and carry large hammers or ride jackhammers. There's even dragon-like creatures called flying geckos that spit fire. Icy Peak realm is as you'd expect, a snowy mountainous region filled with frozen pools and ice crystals. The inhabitants, who resemble chubby little bears and speak with an exaggerated Canadian accent, need Spyro's help to unblock the paths the Rhinox have obstructed with ice, so that Bob and Doug can meet up and go ice fishing. The enemies here range from Rhinox with snowball guns and pickaxes, freaky looking rat creatures that try to blow Spyro up with TNT, and vultures that don't actually attack Spyro but still need to be killed with the cannons in order to collect their gems. Time for an Oriental inspired realm by way of Bamboo Terrace, a world based on ancient China. The panda inhabitants here are trying to work in their bamboo fields, but are constantly being harassed by Rhinox. Spyro will need to take out kimono-wearing Rhinox wielding umbrellas as weapons, Rhinox with fireworks, and Water Buffalo. The next alternative character realm is Sergeant Byrd's base, home to the penguin himself and his hummingbird troops. This realm is a mixed environment, with areas that resemble military bunkers, grassy meadows and cliffs, and rivers of lava. Sergeant Byrd will need to fly and shoot his way through the base in order to rescue the hummingbirds that have been captured by the sorceress's army. Country Speedway is the second speedway Spyro visits. The realm design suggests it's currently autumn, and the architecture is done in an American Midwest farm style. Inhabitants here are mainly farm animals, and intelligent ones at that, seeing as they can drive tractors and fly planes. If you have arachnophobia, look away now, because the last realm of Midday Gardens is Spider Town. It's safe to assume that this is meant to be a garden of some sort, given the homeworld it's in and the fact the spiders spawn from flower pots. The boss of Spider Town is the Spider Queen, a huge spider that spins to attack and spits out smaller spiders to chase down Sparx. Once you finish up in Midday Gardens, it's time to hop on the whirligig and head for the next boss. The sorceress has become enraged at the fact Spyro still hasn't kicked the bucket, and, after having a good shout at poor Bianca, decides to create her own monster. Thus, Spike is born, and compared to Buzz, this boss can be a real nightmare to defeat. Sergeant Byrd will help Spyro out by dropping various objects he can use against Spike, such as magma balls. The problem is, it's so awkward to line Spyro up to correctly knock the balls into Spike, that by the time you've done it, you'll more than likely be hit by his plasma shots. Once Spike's been hit twice, he'll stomp the ground and cause cracks to appear that spurt out fire from time to time, so another thing to try and avoid. Sergeant Byrd will now drop red crystals that will grant Spyro special flame breath to use. And here comes the next issue. Spike gets the same ability if he absorbs one of the crystals into his gun. So not only do you need to get close enough to use the flame breath, but you have to make sure Spike won't flame you back in turn, which is where I experienced my first death in this Spyro 3 playthrough. The final phase will have Sergeant Byrd dropping blue crystals, which Spyro can spit directly at Spike for explosive damage. Again, Spike can use these to his advantage, sending a wave of plasma energy out towards Spyro, which will need to be outrun. Overall, an incredibly difficult fight that makes later bosses look like a cakewalk. The third homeworld, Evening Lake, is my favourite in Spyro 3 on account of its beauty. The lake pretty much makes up the entirety of this homeworld, with all except one realm entrance being situated underwater. A castle stands half submerged in the lake, and can be climbed and glided from in order to reach the various eggs dotted about the homeworld. I also have to mention the whale swimming around the lake that swallows Spyro whole. It intentionally does so, as the whale's body houses a dragon egg called Jonah, of course, and once Spyro heads towards the whale's mouth, it happily spits him back out. Bianca will show up once again, but she isn't so hostile towards Spyro, and even promises to look after the rest of the dragon eggs if he and Hunter leave. Of course, Spyro would never leave without collecting the rest of the eggs, and Bianca is forced to take drastic measures, capturing Hunter by laying a trap for him. This can cause problems in some of the realms, depending on what order you do them in, as with Hunter captured, any minigame related to him will be unavailable for the time being. The playable character you'll meet in this homeworld is the eloquent yeti Bentley. Contrary to what Moneybags says, Bentley is a highly intelligent creature, often using big fancy words that leave Spyro scratching his head, and delivering brilliant lines such as this.
Why, you brazenly avaricious, duplicitous larcenous Ursine!
Bentley has a younger brother named Bartholomew, who often gets into trouble and needs his big brother to bail him out. Evening Lake has 7 realms. The first I visited was Lost Fleet, as it takes a while to complete if you don't know where to go, and I kind of just wanted it out the way. The realm is set in a ship graveyard of sorts, with several ships rotting away on the sand. The pools surrounding the ships are acidic, so not a pleasant experience for Spyro if he falls in. Crazy Ed, the treasure hunter, needs Spyro to clear out all the spooky ghosts so he can look for the fabled riches he's heard about. But the ghosts in question turn out to just be Rhinox and Sheets. Other enemies include crabs, which are recycled baddies from the second game, and even vultures from the first game, though these ones won't attack you. Frozen Altars is a unique realm because Spyro won't have his usual flame breath as long as he stays here. Instead, the Ice Fairy, Gabrielle, will grant him Ice Breath, which he can use to freeze solid allies and enemies alike. He can then either finish off an enemy with his charge attack, or use a frozen ally as a sort of stepping stone towards hard to reach areas. Spyro needs to help the inhabitants of Frozen Altars take out the invading Rhinox, and the creepiest snowman I have ever seen. Just look at their faces! Probably the most loved realm of Spyro 3 has got to be Fireworks Factory. With an oriental flair, unique enemies such as the Rhinox Ninjas, and the return of 2 classic characters from the second game, Greta and Handel, it's not surprising to see why players love this realm. Also, Matrix parody. The goal is to help the 2 siblings destroy the sorceress's rocket before it can be sent into space. Charmed Ridge is another realm that stands out in my mind, for good and bad reasons. So the good. I love the, charm of this place, for lack of a better word. The inhabitants remind me of ye olde Spyro 1 days, where I helped the fairies of Lofty Castle. And just look at the colours! So pretty! The fairies need Spyro's help in stopping the cat wizards of Felinia from forcing their princess Amy to marry the cat prince Azrael. What the fairies don't realise is that the 2 are actually very much in love, and would rather run away together than live under the other fairies and wizards' strict rules. Kids, eh? So what's the bad? The minigames. I'll go into more detail in the gameplay section, but they bring back bad memories. Bentley's outpost is home to the Yeti himself and his younger brother. The design reminds me of the Tibetan levels from Tomb Raider 2. Snowy caves, falling icicles, even gongs to hit. While Bentley's been locked up, Rhinox have invaded his mountain home and kicked out Bartholomew. So Bentley needs to clear them all out and take back what's rightfully his. Enemies here include large torch-bearing Rhinox and seals that throw snowballs, because everybody knows seals live high up in the mountains. Honey Speedway is the 3rd speedway of the game, and I really don't like this one. We've already had a speedway based around giant bugs, do we really need another? Regardless, Honey Speedway is as it sounds, a realm based around honey. Giant bumblebees make their home here, and there's even a river of honey flowing through the zone. If you recognise the background, that's because it's the same one used in the Treetops realm of Spyro 1, only with beehives hanging from the trees. Starfish Reef is the 3rd Sparx realm. Enemies here are mainly small and large starfish, with the larger ones able to multiply when hit enough times. If you're not careful, Sparx can easily be overrun. Other enemies include eels that spit fire at Sparx, and of course the Manta Ray boss, one of the toughest opponents Sparx will come across. Its sporadic movements, ability to spawn smaller manta rays, and replicate itself certainly make it a challenge. During your travels through Evening Lake, Bianca will visit Hunter and apologise for capturing him, even bringing him some food to eat. She then explains why the dragons disappeared in the first place. After a dragon elder had a disagreement with the sorceress, the evil crone banished them to the other side of the world. What she didn't realise at the time was that the dragons were the source of all magic, and without them, things began to go horribly wrong. Bianca believes this is why the sorceress wanted all the dragon eggs in the first place, to bring magic back. Later on, when you finish up in Evening Lake and jump on the rocket, Bianca finds out the sorceress's true plans for the hatchlings. She needs their wings to craft a spell that will make her live forever. Horrified at this news, Bianca rushes back to tell Hunter and free him. While the 2 of them head on to the next homeworld to wait for Spyro, our plucky purple dragon has his own problems to deal with, in the form of Scorch, the sorceress's latest monster. Scorch will fly around his arena and spit out eggs, which hatch into various creatures depending on what stage of the fight you're on. They start off as crabs, then become those freaky creatures with the TNT, then burning smileys, and finally Buzz, the boss from the first Homeworld. The fight is a relatively simple one, with Bentley throwing ammunition at Spyro which can be used against Scorch. Just kill or dodge the spawned enemies and shoot at the big bad. It's time for the last Homeworld, Midnight Mountain. The colours used here remind me of Winter Tundra from Spyro 2, but this place is much grander. Though set atop a mountain, the grass is a vibrant turquoise green, with no snow in sight. And rather than one solid chunk of land, the Homeworld is made up of different islands connected by bridges. It's also the only Homeworld that features pink oozing liquid rather than the usual clear bodies of water that Spyro can swim in, and the only one he can die in by falling off into the abyss below. My favourite thing about Midnight Mountain is the beautiful midnight sky. Stars and galaxies can be seen overhead, and the colours are a beautiful mix of pinks, purples and blues. Bianca shows up at the start of Midnight Mountain and promises to help Spyro stop the evil sorceress once and for all. She tells him to collect more eggs to strengthen her magic, and in turn, she will unlock the hidden portal that leads to the sorceress's lair. Once this is done, she'll wait by the entrance to the lair, warning Spyro to be careful, as her once mentor will be expecting him. The last playable character you'll meet in Spyro 3 is the wacky monkey Agent 9. Starting out life as a lab monkey, Agent 9 was taught how to fight and given his signature laser blaster by the professor from Spyro 2, who we even get to meet again in Agent 9's lab. He has a deep hatred of Rhinox, and coupled with his completely deranged nature, he can be a very unpredictable and dangerous creature to be around. Midnight Mountain technically has 8 realms, but one is a super secret place that I won't mention just yet. Let's start off with one of the more interesting realms, Crystal Islands, because it's not a Spyro game unless there's a realm filled with crystals. What this realm lacks in size, it makes up for in design and content. Spyro needs to help the wizards of Crystal Islands sort out a problem caused by their misuse of the sorceress's magic, namely turning everything around them into crystal, including the animals that live here. The magicians will help Spyro traverse Crystal Islands by magicking up gems that he can use as platforms. The one thing that makes this realm stand out is the ability to fly using the power-up portal. Desert Ruins will be the second time I mention Tomb Raider in a Spyro video, as this realm is basically a spoof of Lara Croft's adventures through ancient ruins. Even the objective is to find Gus's girlfriend, Tara.
I spend all day pressing switches and shoving boxes around, and you just waltz in here expecting to claim the treasure.
On the way, you'll run into scorpions of various sizes that will either fire spikes or bursts of flame at Spyro, and fire breathers that heat up the floor they're standing on by spitting up magma. Haunted Tomb is another personal favourite of mine due to the ancient Egypt aesthetic. I swear they left all the good realms for the last Homeworld. Though the inhabitants of Haunted Tombs aren't desperately in need of Spyro's help, they'll still set a task for him, in the form of riddles and making his way through the tomb. This is one of the more tedious realms to complete, as a lot of enemies can't be destroyed by Spyro's flame or charge attacks. Instead, he needs to make use of the exploding rocks to finish off the mummified Earthshapers and the sarcophagi that spawn endless waves of mummy Rhinox. Dino Mines. Oh boy, this one was a toughie for me, mainly because of my slow reactions when dealing with the bandits. This realm is set in the old Wild West, and most of the enemies are gun-toting, dynamite-throwing cowboy dinosaurs. Spyro needs to help free the Sheriff Wyatt by making his way through the realm, and taking out the notorious Dino Gang along the way. Time to visit Agent 9's lab. Set on a tropical island, the lab is home to the Mad Monkey himself and the Professor. Unfortunately, Rhinox have recently invaded the island and plan to destroy the Professor's research, so it's Agent 9's job to blast them all to smithereens. The last speedway in the game is Harbour Speedway. It can be considered very bland when compared to other speedways, given the muted colours and thick shroud of fog hiding the background, but I quite like it. It's a nice change from giant bugs at least. The inhabitants here are of course animals that make their home at or in the sea. Lobsters, sardines, and even albatrosses that, with their pilot helmets on, bear a striking resemblance to Orville from The Rescuers. And finally the last Sparx realm, which won't be available until you defeat the sorceress. Bugbot Factory is very different from the previous Sparx realms. The environment is made entirely of metal, the enemies are much more dangerous, and there are these annoying little beetles that like to steal the keys you need. Let me kill you! The boss of Bugbot Factory, the robotic centipede, can be a challenge for Sparx. Unless you hold on to the power-up you got earlier, then it's a cakewalk. Once you've collected enough eggs, it's time to take on the evil sorceress. Agent 9 will help Spyro out by shooting down the conveniently placed balloon goodies dotted about the arena. It can be difficult getting the initial phase done without taking damage, as Spyro needs to hop onto a cannon and fire at the sorceress before she hits him with a fireball or electric attack. Luckily, some of the balloons will occasionally drop a sheep to recover health. Once the first phase is done, the cannons will be replaced with hoverboards, and it's basically the same thing. Shoot the sorceress, avoid damage. Finally, you'll get to the Ufo Stage, the most difficult part in my opinion, due to trying to turn the cumbersome vehicle, shoot at the sorceress, and avoid damage all at the same time. Eventually you'll defeat her though, and she'll be thrown into the lava, never to be seen again. Or not? The ending of Year of the Dragon treats you to a number of cutscenes, starting out with Bentley interviewing Spyro, which pays homage to the ending of the first game. Spyro then asks if Bentley knows where Hunter's gone, but Bentley plays ignorant. Spyro then visits Agent 9's lab to talk to the professor and old-time friend Alora. She asks him if he's going to visit her in Avalar, but he tells her he needs to find the rest of the eggs and look for Hunter. Agent 9 almost tells Spyro where he's gone, but is cut off by the professor, leaving Spyro suspicious. It's only when he visits Sheila that he finds out what's happened to the fairy numbskull. Turns out Hunter and Bianca have fallen in love and are enjoying a romantic evening watching fireworks. And that's pretty much the end of the game, unless you unlock the super bonus round by collecting all 15,000 gems and 149 eggs. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about this realm. 1, because it's a bonus level and you know my policy on those, and 2, because I couldn't actually finish it due to a stupid minigame that I still hate to this day. But besides that minigame, it's really fun to complete, and has a shock surprise at the end. Well, if you're 6 years old it's a surprise, but you know what I mean. Gameplay. Before I discuss anything to do with character abilities, minigames and so on, I want to mention the auto-challenge tuning implemented in Spyro 3, also known as ACT. Now, if you've played Spyro 1 and 2, particularly the first one in this case, you may have found the game a little too easy at times. ACT rectifies this in Spyro 3 by tuning the game to your skill. So if you're flying through the first few realms and minigames with no deaths and no damage, the game will start to get harder. If you're struggling to make it through a realm in one piece and find yourself losing lives, the game will get easier. It's difficult to pinpoint the moment this happens though, as it's not supposed to be obvious when the game basically tells you, you suck at this, let me dumb things down for you. Let's move on to character abilities. While Spyro himself hasn't learned anything new, and still retains the knowledge of how to climb, swim and head bash, his new buddies have a wide array of abilities to spice up gameplay. Let's start with Sheila. Her realm and minigames are themed around her ability to jump, double jump and super jump. She can also do a stomp attack that's similar to Spyro's head bash, and has the same purpose. While she can't charge or breathe fire, she can deliver a nasty kick to those pesky Rhinox. She's a very fast character too, only behind Spyro and Sparx when it comes to speed. Sergeant Byrd's realm and minigames revolve around his ability to fly and fire rockets. The flying can be a little awkward when the camera doesn't want to play ball, and trying to make Sergeant Byrd speed up or even slow down can be a pain. But other than that, the flying is relatively smooth and quite fun. And thank God for rockets that automatically lock on, else I shudder to think what the Enchanted Towers minigame would be like. Bentley is both brains and brawn in Spyro 3, happy to spout elegant poetry while smashing in a Rhinox skull. His realm and minigames are based around the giant club he carries that allows him to not only bash enemies' heads in, but also break open chests even Spyro can't destroy without help. The second use for his club is spinning it very fast, deflecting projectiles back towards enemies. Agent 9, in my opinion, has the most difficult abilities to master, mainly because aiming in Spyro games is a god-awful affair. Agent 9's attacks are based around his laser blaster and ability to throw bombs. The laser blaster can either be used in third person spray and pray style, or first person sniper mode. Moving the reticle in first person can feel very sluggish, but the game does try to compensate by having slow to react enemies. Also, his laser blasts bounce off walls, so you can actually take out enemies before they even come round the corner. When throwing bombs, you can either tap to throw a bomb immediately, or hold the button down to get a more carefully aimed throw, complete with arc animation. We may as well mention Sparx while we're at it, seeing as he is a playable character this time. Sparx has similar abilities to Spyro, being able to charge and fire projectiles, which can be upgraded for a limited time by eating various butterflies. He can also strafe while he shoots, which comes in pretty handy when he starts to get swamped by enemies in tougher realms like Bugbot Factory. Sparx can take twice as many hits in these realms than when he's outside with Spyro, possibly because the enemies he faces here are on a much smaller scale compared to the enemies Spyro faces. Once Sparx completes his realm, he'll be awarded with a new ability that'll help Spyro out. Assuming you do the realms in order, he'll learn to pick up gems from further away, point to treasure when the L1, L2, R1 and R2 buttons are held down, take one extra hit, and finally break open treasure chests and teleport Spyro to a certain realm by way of the Atlas. Very nifty abilities for those looking to collect every gem possible. Defeating enemies as Spyro is the same as it's always been: flame, charge, or a combination of both. There are enemies that require a bit more thought, however. I already mentioned the mummified earth-shapers and sarcophagi in haunted tombs, but another good example is the snowmen of frozen altars. They cannot be charged or flamed, and going anywhere near them will result in Spyro getting a good throttling before being thrown back a fair distance. The only way to defeat them is to use the laser defense system that good old Moneybags sold to the inhabitants. For a small fee, I'm sure. Now to go into some more detail about minigames. Unlike Spyro 2, minigames don't take up part of the main realm. Instead, Spyro must travel through a special portal to reach them. If it involves a different character, Spyro will meet up with them inside the portal and controls will switch over. Minigames are a great addition to Spyro 3, making a realm feel that much bigger and adding so many different challenges that every player is guaranteed to find something they enjoy. Unfortunately, some minigames were not created equally. Now, I could talk at great length about the best ones, but being English and therefore very good at complaining, I'm going to rant on for a few minutes about some of the abominations of minigames the developers dare inflict upon us, the gamers. So earlier I mentioned an escort mission in Spooky Swamp. Here, you take control of Sheila and need to guide 2 fireflies to the dragon eggs at the other end of the zone, so they can break them out of their cages by way of bombs. Along the way, there are boulders and mushrooms which Sheila will need to kick or head bash to give the fireflies a clear path. But do they make your job easier by walking a sensible route all the way to the eggs? Nope! They stray off the path, they loop back around, they make it look like they're going one way and suddenly change course. Ugh! Now, this one might have a few people disagreeing with me, but I personally hate the minigame in Charmed Ridge where Sergeant Byrd takes on the cat witches. The goal is to shoot all the witches off their brooms, with 3 separate rounds that increase in difficulty. If they ram into Sergeant Byrd, or hit him with their magic, he takes damage. The problem comes in the last round, when the floor is turned into blue ooze. If Sergeant Byrd touches the floor, it also counts as damage, which he'll inevitably do at some point when a witch hits him and knocks him out the sky. So you're effectively taking 2 points of damage in one go. Not to mention the witches always go out of line of sight, even when I desperately turn the camera to try and face them. Oh, and let's not forget that if you die, you have to start from round 1 and do it all over again. Ugh! While minigames are usually based around the character's abilities, as we discussed earlier, there are some exceptions. The one that springs to mind also happens to be the one I hate the most: the Yeti boxing match in Frozen Altars. That realm always seems to break the rules, doesn't it? Rather than using Bentley's normal club attacks, you're thrown into a ring and pitted up against another Yeti, which eagle-eyed viewers will recognise as the Yeti from Colossus in Spyro 2. Now, I'm really not a big fan of boxing games, and this just further cements that hatred. How are you supposed to fight an enemy controlled by AI that can react to every button you press in a split second? The only way I've ever been able to beat the other Yeti is to trap him in the corner of the ring and quick jab him, but even then you're not guaranteed a win. Ugh! Now, I was going to have a one bad minigame per alternate playable character, but to be honest, I don't mind Agent 9's minigames. In fact, they're some of the best in Spyro 3. Taking out the Bailey gang in Dynamines a la classic rail shooter style, going all Doom in Fireworks Factory. I don't even mind doing the 5 deadly trials of King Rover in Haunted Tombs. A big change in Spyro 3 is the frequent use of vehicles: skateboards, speedboats, submarines, hoverboards, even UFOs. This game has got everything. I found the vehicles divide opinions. Some people love them, while others aren't as keen. I'm kind of in between. I really enjoy the skateboarding arena mini-games because I was a big fan of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series as a kid, and taking on the sorceress in a UFO is entertaining, if not a little odd for a final boss battle. One thing I cannot stand though is those awful skateboard races in later realms. Hitting obstacles, falling off the edge of the map, taking a dip in that nasty acid. Suffice to say, I suck at skateboard racing. And when you do finish in first place and think you can put this awful minigame behind you, Hunter always wants to give you another challenge.
I know you're fast, but I bet you can't defeat all the crabs on the course and still beat me in a race.
Please, someone just end my suffering. The last thing that's worth talking about in more detail is speedways, as they've had a few changes in Spyro 3. In Spyro 2, you'd start a speedway, go through all the objectives, then go find Hunter or another character for a secret side mission. In Spyro 3, you have two modes. The usual with objectives, now named Time Attack, and a race mode where you take on the inhabitants of that particular speedway. Mushroom Speedway pits you up against butterflies, Country Speedway flying pigs, Honey Speedway bumblebees, obviously, and Harbour Speedway albatrosses. Somewhere in the zone you'll find Hunter, who is ready with a side mission. This time, however, you take control of Hunter himself, rather than staying as Spyro and tagging along. Every Speedway side mission revolves around the space cows and sheep either abducting people or just generally causing a nuisance, so it's Hunter's job to take them out once and for all. Mushroom Speedway involves Hunter shooting down pesky UFOs with his plane. Country Speedway has him strapping on his jetpack and shooting the space cows trying to abduct the farmers. Honey Speedway has him in a speedboat, trying to escape from an angry sheep UFO, and Harbour Speedway involves chasing down a damaged UFO by flying through smoke rings with his makeshift wings. Music and voice work. This section is going to be rather short, at least when compared to the last one, as not much has really happened since Spyro 2, apart from doubling the amount of voice actors. Stewart Copeland is still composing the music for Spyro 3, but this time he has someone to help him, Ryan Beveridge. The music is very different to the last two games, and honestly, I love it. I personally think it's Stewart's best work on the Spyro series, and I wonder if the change in themes is because of Ryan's input. Ted Price also loved the music, stating, "I think it's by far his best work to date, and we really clicked. There are some great tunes." One of my favourite things about the music is the character themes, and how well they suit said character while still in keeping to the tone of the game. Sheila's theme makes use of a didgeridoo, an instrument synonymous with Australia. Sergeant Byrd's theme sounds like you're about to charge off into a war zone. Bentley's theme, my personal favourite, makes use of random grunts and gibberish voice lines. And finally, Agent 9's theme gives off a sci-fi action feel, with parts of it very staccato, which suits his crazy personality. Unfortunately for me, it does seem like the PAL version drew the short end of the straw this time around, as themes I'd heard previously from other realms had been repeated for later use in the game. Crystal Islands uses the same theme as Seashell Shore, Evening Lake theme is just a repeat of Sunrise Springs theme, and even the boss battle against the sorceress uses the same theme as Sparx. This is a shame, because the NTSC versions of the Crystal Islands, Evening Lake and Sorceress's Lair themes are amazing. Seriously, if you're a PAL person like me and you've never heard the NTSC themes, check them out. According to IMDb, Spyro 3 has 13 different voice actors, as opposed to Spyro 2's 6, which makes sense, as Spyro 3 has a lot of heavy dialogue cutscenes when compared to the previous game. Tom Kenny, Greg Berger, and Marcello Tubert, hope I'm saying that right, are the only ones to return for the third instalment. But that doesn't mean the new voice actors aren't worth mentioning. Andre Soliuzo voices Sparx and Bartholomew in Spyro 3, but he's also voiced the English version of Wiz from Final Fantasy XV, and Neil Ross, who voiced Moneybags and Bentley, narrated every codex entry for the Mass Effect series. There's also Caroline Lawrence, who voiced Zoe the Fairy. Outside of the game, you may recognise her as the voice of Sandy from SpongeBob SquarePants, and Ashley from Resident Evil 4. And let's have one more female voice actor for good measure, Pamela Hayden, who voiced Bianca, the Weather Imps and the Seals, and you may recognise outside of Spyro 3 as the voice of Milhouse from The Simpsons. There are other voice actors who I'm sure I'd be surprised to find have voiced other well-known characters, but to be honest, I just want to get this video done now. So let's finally move on to sales and critical reception. Just like Spyro 2, Spyro 3 was a huge success from the get-go, selling more than 2 million units in the US and receiving a Platinum Sales Award from the Entertainment and Leisure Software Publishers Association for selling over 300,000 units in the UK. Rather than worrying about if the third game was going to be successful, Insomniac Games were now worrying that they'd run ideas dry with Spyro 3. They then made the ultimate decision to leave the series and start with a new franchise. IGN gave Spyro 3 high praise, stating, "If you liked the past Spyros, this one will almost certainly be your favourite of the lot. It has all their speed and graphical polish, the same remarkably well done control, lots more variety in its gameplay, and most of all, the dangerously cute Spyro personality. Even if Spyro has to share a little bit of the spotlight, Year of the Dragon is as fine a note as any for them to go out on, and proves that the PlayStation, even if it's losing all its thunder to PS2, can still play host to a universally excellent game." Complaints that did arise about the game were aimed at the sometimes dodgy camera, which is always a failing of these Spyro games, and the unoriginal story, though I personally don't have a problem with it. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a game intended for kids as much as adults. What more can they do to the story without overcomplicating it? To this day, Spyro Year of the Dragon is rated the second most popular game in the whole series, with a score of 90.59% on GameRankings.com. And that's my rather long video on Spyro Year of the Dragon, over 9,000 words. Now, I was considering carrying on this series and talking about Enter the Dragonfly next, but I'm not so sure anymore. Given that the remake has now officially been announced, and only covers the first 3 games, I might leave it as it is. I will say though, even though this took me a heck of a long time to gather the footage, write a script, record and edit, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Spyro 3 will always be my favourite of the series, and playing it again was such a nostalgia trip. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to me ramble on about the plucky purple dragon, and if you did, let me know by leaving a like. It really helps me out after all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in whatever I play or talk about next.